spirits at all. We've come up empty-handed. So the question arises, surely the conjurations must tell us how to talk to demons. And there's that worrying little practice. Now, the conjurations do not tell us how to talk to demons. The conjurations tell us how to talk at demons. It's not a conversation, this is a monologue, a series of hectoring pronouncements about God's supposed glory and a hefty amount of threats. Conversations, on the other hand, conversations require free exchange. Like the tavern, they require a certain amount of equality. We stand elbow to elbow at a crowded bar with people from all walks of culture. We need to negotiate here in a much more cunning approach. We need a language which is both more fluid and more direct and more expressive. There is punning, there is allusion, there is homonym, synonym, assonance, aliases, substitutions, omissions. It's the language of insiders, the language of those who are in the know. So I would argue that it's far more useful for Goetic magicians to read the works of Jean Genet, or Rabelais, or Fulcanelli, or Hélène Cixous, or Alice Becker-Ho, and to actually learn to speak the argot, that is, the way the demons actually talk. As magicians, I would counsel that we lose our love of the monologue. The irony of giving a speech isn't lost on me. And rather listen to what our companions are saying, rather than shouting over them. So if we're in this habit of talking at demons, where do we pick up this very unappealing trait? Here we have to look to dualism. Whether its origins are in Persia or elsewhere, this is very much the inheritance of Christianity. Dualism encompasses simple categories of good and evil, which in the tavern are horribly mixed. The demons that we encounter in the medieval period are not to be talked with, they are to be talked at. This is because standing behind all of the demons is a single, unified evil. The most unequivocal example of this is given by King James I, who was deeply impressed by the demonologists, and in his 1597 Demonologie, a book in the form of a dialogue, he's asked his two interlocutors discuss, and he's asked why the devil is called by innumerable names by the necromancers, notably Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Satan. And he concludes, even so, I say he deceives the witches by attributing to himself diverse names, as if every different shape he transforms himself into were a different kind of spirit. This is what lies behind talking at demons, the knowledge that they are all simply masks of the devil himself. This is the orthodox theological position, and one that we see in modern culture, for example in The Exorcist. It's a very similar exchange. The exorcist walks into the room, and the inexperienced exorcist says, "Let me tell you about the names," and he says, "Shut up. Shut up. I know who it is, it's the devil. This is the theological position. There aren't many spirits, there is one spirit, and the one spirit is the devil. But James here has opened up another level of complexity. The necromancers themselves, the ritual specialists, they believe that the spirits are manifold. But let's be careful here. And necromancers are not challenging dualism. They're simply dividing up the devil into usable, personified parts. They found an expedient way in which to interact with the spirit world. Their hierarchic vision of hell, courtesy largely of Dante, Milton, Michael Sellers, is no different to a faux Catholic using the saints. Thus the necromancers in this period are both pious and heretical. They're filling an invidious need between the expensive services offered by the church and the pressing needs of the people found in a tavern such as this. In particular, those searching for treasure, which is buried in the devil's chthonic realm and nothing to do with God. So the necromancers, even in distinguishing between the various kinds of devils, are not entering into a conversation. They are issuing orders backed by threats or violence. The demons are there to be compelled. This means issuing threats from a position of divine authority. We have no Faustian bargain being struck. This is dominate and command, now as Solomon and now as Christ. To suggest otherwise is a modern fantasy. And the historical claims of the sorcerer's craft also make this claim because they are seeking their demise. So where did the Grimoires get this talking about demons from? Where did they inherit their ritual scripts? Did they invent them? No. The academics have definitively answered this question for us. See in particular the works of Richard Kiekever, of Owen Davies, and of Amanda Marchi. The bald fact is that the conjurations in the grimoires are drawn from the exorcism manuals. This is the history of the grimoires that as magicians we tend not to emphasise or know. It's uncomfortable to admit that the techniques of our magical books, though we can draw parallels to more comforting ages or the Greek magical papyri, are fundamentally Christian exorcisms. The 16th century exorcism manuals predate the Bibliothèque Bleue literature and were widely disseminated into the hands of clerics. And clerics in this period meant anyone who'd had a haircut like a priest. It's fantastic. There's a whole industry of people rushing out, shaking hands, going, yeah, I'm a priest now. And the reason for it, hanging around in a place like this and offering your services, is that as a cleric you could perform exorcisms. As a cleric you could work and command with demons. And as a cleric you could avoid being tried anywhere other than in the ecclesiastical court, which meant that you would be treated with more lenience. So when Kiekever talks about the clerical underworld, it's a bunch of dodgy fucking geezers who've shaved their heads. And now have the authority to command demons for clients who are willing to give them good money for the service. So exorcism in this period functioned on two levels. Firstly, is a grand spectacle carried out in cathedrals, with the absence of television and popular propaganda. And secondly, and also this was because of the schism within the church. The Catholic Church was on very dodgy ground. It needed to show people something. People pulling demons out of people was a fantastic show. And the lower class picked up on this. The clerics picked up on this who'd had their head shaved, and they made a quick buck. Armando Maggi, the academic, writes about this in his phenomenal Satan's Rhetoric. I highly recommend Armando Maggi's work. And he describes three-part posters, how evil must be invoked, spoken, and silenced. This method is given in many of the exorcist texts. For example, Valerio Polidori, in his 1582 Practica Exorcistarum, describes a method. And here's the method for the exorcists. Drawing a horrible picture of the devil, and in doing so, getting a name from the person who's possessed, then having the devil on their piece of paper, trapped with a name and trapped with an image, offering it to a can of flame. But we'll save the devil. Right. Hang on a minute. This procedure looks extremely familiar. These horrible pictures are exactly the spirit portraits we see in the Grand Grimoire, with their girly heads and their beetle bodies. And the method of exorcism is very similar to what we find in the Gomorrhean Vero, or indeed the threat of burning the spirit seal that modern practitioners find so very disturbing and unmeasured. We also see the demoniac replaced with the scribe, traditionally a child, rather than the woman who is most often the victim of possession. It's simply a mirror image of Christian exorcist rituals. Also, when we read the exorcism manuals, there is frequent use of the word conjure,